Hello and welcome to Quiet News, news with less noise. I'm your host, Jupiter Exile, and my friends have started to comment about how frequently I respond to statements with a concerned, For this February edition, there are two major topics I want to cover, and the first is a big one. I had to think for a long while about what I wanted to say on the subject of the murder of Tyree Nichols. I don't want to talk about the incident itself. I won't show any clips or photos related to the attack. This event was another step in a long and difficult march. What I'd like to discuss are the statistics and policing strategies that show where we are at in terms of police violence in the country, where I think we should be going, and what states are making progress toward change. A database maintained by the Washington Post indicates that police have killed about 1,000 people a year in the United States since they began tracking the statistics in 2016. About 6%, or 1 in 20, were confirmed unarmed, with 1 in 10 having no mention of a weapon in the report. The Scorpion unit involved in the Nichols murder was created in 2021 as part of a reaction to increasing crime rates. Crime in the U.S. was up by 28% in a comparison from 2019 to 2020, per statistics kept by the World Bank, returning the rate to 2001 levels after a steady decline prior to that year. Studies conducted regarding the effect of adding more police produced a number of interesting findings. The overall finding is that adding somewhere between 10 and 17 police officers will result in saving one life per year. It's a bit cruel to say, but this is cost-effective. Effects are more pronounced in criminal hotspots, and broadly speaking, black lives are saved at twice the rate of white lives when more police officers are added. But there are two important caveats to these findings. One is that increasing police forces increases the arrest rates for misdemeanors, including disorderly conduct, drug possession, drinking in public, and loitering, essentially victimless activities. More troubling is the second caveat. Several areas, mostly in the South and Midwest, do not actually experience any reduction in homicide with the addition of further officers, and in these jurisdictions, the addition of police appears to worsen outcomes. As we know from whodunits and crime dramas, a crime requires means, motive, and opportunity. Any policy we create relating to crime will address one of these elements. A gun control bill aims to remove or diminish the means to commit crime. An increase in policing means a decrease in the opportunity to commit crime. Changes in sentencing may adjust the motives surrounding crime, but we tend to be a bit worse at evaluating this kind of cost as opposed to motives that would apply immediately. Motive is the approach that is actually the most important to explaining and understanding crime. 2020 was a very eventful year. Intuitively, we can say that the economic struggles brought on by coronavirus and the incidents of civil unrest have a strong relation to criminal motives. Crime persists in low-income areas with few economic opportunities because criminal motives arise from desperation. I'm going to step back from modernity to review some historical elements that we know very well. The prohibition of alcohol gave rise to a secondary criminal market. People were motivated to purchase alcohol, and that motivation outweighed the fear of reprisal. Among the servicers for the secondary market were the mafia, and joining the mafia became one of the best means for economic attainment for immigrants who were having difficulty finding other work. This combination of motives naturally led to the proliferation of the mafia, who lost power chiefly because alcohol was made legal once again, removing the motivation for people to engage with a criminal element. Calls for non-policing strategies for crime reduction have grown steadily louder over the last several years. The suggested allocations often relate to counseling, sometimes services for the homeless. These are desperation reduction policies. In late 2022, Health and Human Services released a report offering best practices and implementation strategies for mental health care crisis response. Over $100 million in federal grants were allocated to states for the improvement of mental health crisis response and the expansion of 988 crisis lifeline services. Washington State, Texas, and Virginia are among states that have passed legislation dedicated to the improvement of behavioral crisis response, with yet more states drafting legislation to address a countrywide rise in mental health problems. Earlier in the month, we heard the State of the Union address from President Biden. There was some cattiness about Social Security and the debt ceiling. That's noise. I'm not going to cover it here. Biden spoke further on a subject raised by the administration over the previous month and a little bit prior to that, the criminalization of surprise fees. The administration called on Congress to take action, but some action has already been taken by the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Action has been proposed by the Federal Trade Commission, and they've also brought some challenges against junk fees within the auto industry. The Department of Transportation has a proposed but not finalized rule regarding airline fees, and the Federal Communications Commission is working on rules to standardize the information consumers can view about broadband services when purchasing. There are a lot of examples of junk fees. The administration sets out a definition of junk fees as being those fees which do not serve the purpose of customization, but instead hide mandatory costs, delay cost disclosure until after the purchase, fees that exploit vulnerabilities, like overdrafting at the bank, and lastly, fees that contradict stated advertising, such as a plan or service that advertises that it has no fees, but indeed has some fees. Studies across a number of industries have determined that hidden fees amount to tens of billions of dollars charged to consumers each year. Junk fees give me an opportunity to propagate a phrase sporadically mentioned over the past several years: the grift economy. A truly ridiculous number of industries have found the means to extend their profits through deceit, and it creates an environment where the consumer is required to be hypervigilant up until a point of exhaustion. Eventually, we spend money because we are tired of avoiding all the business practices that squeeze us for money. We endure hidden fees, products that are built to fail, under-delivery of services such as internet speed, insurance companies that don't pay out, airline cancellations due to overbooking, proprietary phone chargers with higher pricing, artificially complex tax codes, and shrinkflation. If you would like to hear something louder regarding the grift economy, I have several recommendations. There are some very good segments from John Oliver's Last Week Tonight that detail predatory practices in the rental market and other tricks like the pink tax, where women generally pay more for goods just because they're colored pink and marketed to women. YouTube channel Some More News recently compiled a segment called It's Expensive to Be Poor that details issues with poor quality products and predatory fees. If you haven't listened to Some More News, I would define them as being quite loud. The term grift economy is also used in a video by ThoughtSlime with references to NFTs and other recent scams. There have been concerns analyzed in congressional hearings regarding the possible predatory nature of retail stock market applications and the pay for priority model that is used in stock trading. Adam Conover released a video regarding the over-merging of companies allowing progressively more hostile business practices. Ticketmaster was a hot topic late last year after a website crashed caused issues with ticket sales for a Taylor Swift concert. After a merger with Live Nation and subsequently buying out other competitors, Ticketmaster is dominating the live performance industry, with exclusive control over most venues and many artists. Artists who want to avoid using Ticketmaster will be blocked from performing in many venues across the nation. Because they hold so much control within the industry, Ticketmaster is free to inconvenience clients and set arbitrary costs. They are no longer beholden to competition. Large mergers are subject to government vetting, but the administration has been favorable towards mergers going back to the Obama era, allowing major deals in telecommunications and cable. we used to engage in more trust-busting and anti-monopoly legislation, the most famous of which is surely the breakup of AT&T and Ma Bell, after which we saw competition bring a lot of advancement to the telecom industry. If capitalism continues with no guardrails, mergers and acquisitions will eventually create an environment where consumers are forced to engage with monopolistic crooks. The modern prominence of corporate-controlled media and major lobbying firms exacerbate these effects. The system can only flourish when it is well kept. I can't say for certain if it relates to mergers in particular, but the freight train derailment in Palestine, Ohio is certainly relevant when discussing corporate cost-cutting and negligence. In the time since the release of a large quantity of toxic chemicals, it has come to light that rail company Norfolk Southern had previously opted against installing additional security measures that could have prevented this derailment. The White House indicated in a statement that the Trump administration laid the groundwork for the accident by repealing several rail industry safety standards, but the standards repealed don't appear to relate to the case of this particular train. Of note, the train derailed in Ohio was classified as mixed freight rather than a high-hazard train, which may speak to a flaw in the designation of chemicals transport and the way that relates to safety standards. The standards that were repealed related to high-hazard trains, which is why they would not have applied in the case of this particular train. Nonetheless, this has brought to light that train derailments are far more common than one may assume, though generally not this catastrophic. This tragedy ironically comes in on the heels of a rail strike late last year. In the strike, workers fought for more flexibility in their hours. Current industry standards require workers to remain on call for weeks at a time, with harsh penalties for failure to respond to work demands at any hour. The strike was brought to a close forcibly by the Biden administration, securing some wage gains, but only 1 day of paid leave, while unions were seeking 15 days. Essentially, what I mean when I refer to the grift economy is a massively broad topic. I wish I had been the one to coin the term. I've been using it to discuss with friends for, I feel, a couple of years now, but it's not me who said it first. I probably read it in an online article and then broadened it myself. Please, though, take it up. Share it with your friends. I'd like to close out today's segment with a small tip. If you need to build or fix a habit, look for a shortcut. Find a way to make things easier or harder. If you need to exercise, make sure your exercise clothes are close at hand. If you want to cut back on sweets, keep fewer in the house, or keep them far away from where you spend time. Simply needing to get up to go and get something can make you less likely to indulge, or, conversely, having something immediately at hand makes it easier to commit to work on something. If I find that I need to get a script written, even if I've got just a blank document open, I'll try and keep open that document page, that blank piece of paper, to remind me that I need to get some work done, and also to make that work immediately in reach, so that I can sit down and work on it that much faster. It's a subtle kind of motivation, but it's helpful for a number of things. Bonus tip: most multivitamins are a grift. You should only take vitamins if recommended by a doctor or a nutritionist to supplement some dietary issue or lack. Commonly available vitamins aren't required to demonstrate any kind of efficacy before approval by the FDA due to a law from 1994 that was pushed for by the pharma lobby in order to protect the profits they earned from selling vitamins. This has been Quiet News. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you'd like to discuss something that wasn't covered here, leave a comment and we'll have a chat.